The most helpful parenting style is authoritative, not authoritarian, not super control-based, and also not permissive, which is where we're letting them do whatever they want. If you've read all the parenting books, listened to all the podcasts, validated all the feelings, tried all the gentle parenting scripts, and your child is still having meltdown after meltdown after meltdown, this episode is for you. Welcome back to Raised Resilient, where I help you end the constant meltdowns without punishments, bribes, or yelling, and even if you've tried all the things and nothing has worked. I'm Dr. Hillary Manzik, clinical psychologist, parenting coach, and mom to 3 sensitive, deeply feeling kids who feel their feelings in a big way. And I'm so glad you're here. So I hear this from parents all the time. They come to me and they tell me we are still dealing with daily meltdowns that last for hours over absolutely nothing. Like the tiniest thing will set them off. And we have tried it all. We have validated the feelings. We have said all the right things. We are doing everything right. They'll tell me we're not punishing. We're not yelling. Well, we're trying not to yell, right? But we get pushed to our breaking point and then we do. But we are trying so hard to show up the way that the internet tells us to, right? The gentle parenting that the internet tells us is best for our kids. And it's not working. There's still chaos in our home. Every day still feels so incredibly hard. What gives? And I think sometimes when parents come into our universe, they wonder, well, what's going to actually be different about anything that you're sharing here? Because we've already tried all those things. We're already doing all those things. And so if that's you, if you feel like I am already trying all the things and it's just not working, I want you to really listen to this episode. And I want to talk specifically about gentle parenting because I think that, honestly, over the past 5-6 years, it has been the most popular parenting content on Instagram, on Facebook, has been gentle parenting content. And I've said since I started this podcast, you can go back and listen to episode 2. I've said that I don't like labels because I think for a while there were other labels trying to catch on too. It was gentle parenting, but it was also respectful parenting and peaceful parenting and conscious parenting. And all of it was really different ways of saying the same thing, which I think what we're really trying to say is parenting differently than maybe we were parented, right? We're looking to help our kids learn to express their emotions instead of learning to hold them in because they're expected to behave a certain way. Now, the single biggest misconception about all of those approaches is this. And this is where I think everybody goes wrong. And I'm going to explain why and how this goes so off the rails. But when people hear that we're supposed to allow all the feelings, right? We're supposed to let our kids feel. We're supposed to encourage our kids to feel their feelings. What that typically translates to for families is just kind of letting kids do whatever they want. And that has never been the point of gentle parenting, peaceful parenting, any of these parenting approaches. Nobody ever said that we're supposed to just let our kids do whatever they want. But that is how these approaches have gotten translated through all of the content out there about how to, raise kids who are comfortable feeling all of their emotions. Somehow that has translated to just let them do whatever they want. They're in their feelings. And that has never been what we mean. Okay. That would be considered permissive parenting. So if we look back to research from the 1960s and 70s, there were 4 primary parenting styles identified by psychologists. And these parenting styles were authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and uninvolved. So uninvolved would be like neglectful parenting, parents who are just not really interacting with their kids or meeting their needs, just kind of letting them do whatever they want, but not involved with them. Permissive would be you're involved with your kids, but you're just sort of letting them do whatever they want. You're not setting limits or boundaries. You're not setting expectations for them. You're just kind of letting them do whatever they want, which is a little bit different from uninvolved, again, because you're interacting with your kids, but you are not, maybe you don't feel comfortable setting those boundaries, right? Maybe you feel like you have to just let them do whatever they want because you are conflict avoidant, right? That would be permissive versus uninvolved, which is more neglectful. And then there's authoritarian and authoritative. Authoritarian parenting is very strict, control-based punishments, yelling, controlling parenting. And then there's authoritative, which is both warm, right? So there's a lot of warmth and love and kindness, but also boundaried. So you're setting limits, you're setting boundaries, you have very clear expectations for your kids, but you're doing all of this with warmth and love. And even in the 1960s and 70s, before we had decades upon decades of research on attachment theory, which is the quality of the parent-child relationship and how the quality of that relationship impacts kids over time. Before we had that research, we had already identified that the most helpful parenting style is authoritative, not authoritarian, not super control-based, and also not permissive, which is where we're letting them do whatever they want. And I think what has happened is people tried to repackage this in, the 2020s, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, people online started to repackage the idea of authoritative parenting as gentle parenting. But the word gentle implies this sort of passiveness that I think has really taken off in terms of how people think about gentle parenting. People think about gentle parenting as, we're just sort of letting our kids feel and backing off and letting them do what they want. And that was never what was intended. What I think was intended was trying to repackage this idea of authoritative parenting, which is warm and boundaried, and sharing it with parents under a different label in a way that maybe the hope was that they could understand better, right? And I think the problem with all of this gentle parenting content is it can feel very much like our role is just to let our kids do whatever. And I've heard the memes, I'm sure, or I've seen the memes. I'm sure you've seen the memes that say, I'm not gentle parenting because my kid doesn't gentle kid, right? So it's this idea that I can't gentle parent because when I just let my kid do whatever they want, they're kind of chaotic. They're hitting and kicking and screaming and saying horrible things, and I can't just let that happen. So I think what ends up happening is that we hear that we are supposed to be gentle, that we're not supposed to punish, that we don't yell at our kids. And here's what that translates to in practice that actually perpetuates the meltdowns. There are 3 things that are happening here. Okay. The first one is that we're not setting boundaries. Okay. Allowing all feelings never means allowing all behaviors. And I think that's a really important distinction because we can have a child who feels mad and that child can absolutely feel mad. That's important and healthy. But allowing that child to hit and kick and be destructive with those mad feelings is detrimental to that child's development. And this is the part that I think most parents miss, is that it is our job as parents to physically, lovingly and with warmth, but physically stop these behaviors. I like to think of it as if you are the gutter guards when your child is bowling, right? They are not able to keep that ball in the lane yet. And so the gutter guards keep that ball going straight so that it doesn't get lost in the gutter, so that they can actually play the game, because they don't yet have the, gross motor control to keep that ball in the lane otherwise. So similarly, your child doesn't yet have the brain development and impulse control, especially when they're upset and under duress, to stop their bodies when they are angry. So your child is dealing with a still developing brain. And the younger the child, the more this is true. But this is true even as kids get older. And especially if you're dealing with a neurodivergent child who maybe a kid with ADHD whose executive functioning, impulse control is an executive function, is slower to develop, right? So now you've got a kid who doesn't yet have the ability to control their body when they get upset. And it is our job to be those gutter guards. It is our job to help stop those unsafe behaviors, but we can do that while allowing the feeling. And we should do that while allowing the feeling. And ideally, we're doing this with warmth. and care. It is messy in practice. I will be the first to say that. But that is what is required of us. If we want our kids to develop that impulse control over time, we provide it first. And over time, they do it on their own. When we don't stop those behaviors, when kids are just sort of allowed, and I know you're not just allowing your child to hit, you're not okay with it. I get that, even if you're not setting boundaries. And remember, a boundary is something you do that you can follow through on. So if you're asking your child to stop hitting, that is not a boundary, that is a request. So that's a really important distinction. But if you're not setting boundaries, I know it's not because you think it's okay for your kid to hit. So I just want to say that. If you're not setting boundaries, it's probably because you're not sure how, or you didn't know that you should. You felt like saying, hey, we don't hit in this family should be enough, but it's not. It is our job to show up as that sturdy leader and stop these behaviors. And I think that's the single biggest place where gentle parenting and the idea of gentle parenting has gone off the rails, because people think gentle parenting means permissive parenting. And that is never what was intended by anybody in any kind of parenting expert role, because I think everybody knows at this point, the research is so clear, boundaries and warmth. It's not just do whatever you want. So that's the first thing. And the reason that not setting boundaries perpetuates the meltdown cycle is because when your child is out of control, hitting, kicking, pushing, destroying things, they know that they're out of control. They know that these behaviors are not safe, okay, or desired by you. And that feels incredibly unsafe to be doing things that move them out of your good graces. I'll go back to Dr. Ross Green. Kids do well when they can, not when they feel like it, not when it's convenient, but when they can. So if your child is hitting and kicking, that's their best right now. It is messy. It's not ideal, but it is their best right now. It is their messy best right now with the resources and capacity they have and skills that they have in this moment. Okay. And so if our child is doing these behaviors that they know we don't want them to do, that feels incredibly unsafe. Your kid doesn't want to be that kid. They don't want to be that version of themselves that you don't like, right? We don't like that version of our kid that is hitting and kicking. None of us want our kid to be that kid. Well, your kid doesn't want to be that kid either. Okay. And so when you don't stop those behaviors, when you don't step in and help them, they feel increasingly unsafe. And that creates shame. And that shame, and we're going to talk more about shame, but that shame actually perpetuates these behaviors over time. Instead of seeing less of these behaviors, over time you see more. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we have taken from gentle parenting that we have just completely gotten wrong, not on purpose, but just, it's like a game of telephone. With every iteration, it gets a little more distorted, right? And with every piece of content about gentle parenting, I think it gets a little more distorted. And parents have internalized this message that we're just supposed to always be calm, like Mother Teresa, like just saintly, calm energy all the time. That's what your kid needs. Your kid needs your calm. So you better just be calm. And so here's what that looks like in practice. That looks like you white knuckling through your own very real feelings of overwhelm, frustration, exhaustion, worry. What does this behavior mean? Why is my kid still acting like this? So you're feeling all that, and that is so real and so valid. But what are you doing? Because you're supposed to be calm. You are pushing it down and pushing it down. And I can see that you're so mad. I can see that you're upset. But here's the thing. You're saying that in your calm voice. What are you feeling inside? You're feeling anything but calm. You might be this close to losing it, to just screaming at your kid, stop it already, right? We've all been there. Here's the problem with that. You might think, okay, so I'm stuffing my feelings down, but if I'm ultimately not yelling at my kid most of the time, like that's ideal, right? No. Your child is reading your energy, not your words. Your child is reading your tone and your facial expressions and your body language, not your words. And your child's brain, literal neurons, mirror neurons in their brain, they are picking up on your energy So if you are in fight or flight, your child can sense that. And guess what? That doesn't feel safe to your child. So now your child starts to feel unsafe, like, uh-oh, mom or dad is like about to lose it. This doesn't feel safe. And when they already know that they can't stop themselves from all the things that they're doing, that almost pushes them over that edge into even more dysregulation. So the answer is not to actually be perfectly calm all the time, by the way. That is impossible. You are a human being, not a robot, and that's a good thing. The answer is not to just always feel like Zen in the midst of the chaos, because that's just never going to happen. The answer is to learn to actually acknowledge and process your own feelings. Some of that happens in the moment, some of that happens outside the moment. But that's the answer. That's the antidote to this fake calm energy. But I think the idea of gentle parenting has taught us that, like, we got to be calm all the time. Let's just always stay calm and our kids will benefit. And that leads us into this cycle where we are showing up with this white knuckly energy that our kids can sense. And that actually leads to more difficult behaviors over time. Now, all of this, the lack of boundaries, the kid feeling out of control, the kid feeling like, oh, I'm making my mom mad and I don't know how to stop doing that. All of that leads our kids to try to white knuckle through their own emotions because they fear that these emotions are going to slowly push us away. And they know they need us. They depend on us for their literal survival. So they are going to do everything in their power to stay in your good graces, okay? Your child wants to please you. I know you might be thinking, absolutely not. Have you ever seen my child? They look right at me. They do the very thing that I just asked them not to do. Yeah, I know. I have 3 kids of my own. I've been there. But that is not because they're not doing that because they don't care. They're doing that because they know they're out of control. They're dysregulated and they can't stop themselves. And that smile that you see that looks like willful disobedience or defiance, it's really just dysregulation. It's fear. It's that anxious smile because, like, oh, I'm doing the thing that's getting me in trouble and I don't know how to stop. I'm being that version of myself that my mom doesn't like and I don't know how to stop, right? That feels so unsafe. So over time, your child starts to white knuckle through their emotions because they know these big feelings get me into trouble. I don't want to do that. So let me just push it down, push it down, push it down. Well, guess what? Just like you can only push it down so long until you yell, your kid can only push it down for so long until they explode into a meltdown. And this pattern of suppression is how so many kids get stuck in the meltdown cycle. And what we need to do instead is to be able to show up as those sturdy, confident leaders, authoritative parent that our kids need in their most difficult moments so that they feel safe knowing, hey, I can feel this feeling because my mom's the gutter guards. She's helping me. My dad is stopping me from hitting while my brain development catches up until I can do it on my own. And the more your child feels safe and comfortable in the discomfort of those big emotions, the fewer big behaviors we see over time, the fewer aggressive behaviors, the fewer mean words. And the third thing that we have gotten so wrong about gentle parenting is this idea of validating feelings. I could do a whole episode on this. I have talked about this in whole episodes before. But gentle parenting has come out with all these scripts about validating your child's emotions, right? And I almost hate the word validating because it feels so sort of like cold and detached and robotic. And so that's how it often translates in practice, right? That's often how it shows up. We validate, we say, I can see that you feel so mad, but there's no real empathy coming through. There's a million reasons why it's probably difficult for you to show your child real empathy in their hardest moments. A lot of them have to do with your own childhood and how you were responded to when you had big feelings and big behaviors as a child. And a lot of that's not conscious. It's just, it shows up as like a wall between you and your empathic feelings for your child. Because I know you feel empathy for your child, but you probably can't access it in some of those really hard moments, right? So your child is over here doing all these behaviors. And so you're just saying words to try to show your child, hey, I get it, but you're not actually feeling empathy. And again, especially sensitive kids, they pick up on that. And that doesn't feel safe or genuine or authentic. So the antidote to that is to do the deeper work that allows you to actually access real empathy for your child, even in their hardest moments, especially in their hardest moments, because I would argue that's when all of us need empathy the most, right? Is when we're struggling. So that is how I believe that gentle parenting has made the meltdowns worse for so many of us. Unintentionally. Nobody ever intended that outcome. But again, like a game of telephone, with every piece of content, some of these ideas have gotten so distorted over time that we've interpreted these ideas in ways that actually hurt our relationships with our kids instead of helping. So look, if you've done all the things that the gentle parenting books told you to do, if you've validated all the feelings, you've allowed the feelings, you've been so calm, and it's not working, I want to invite you to go to the link in the show notes and book a free breakthrough call with someone from my team. We'll talk about exactly where it's gone off the rails. And if this is something we can help you with, we're going to let you know. And we'll show you exactly what that looks like. Because here's the thing. In order to shift out of this place where we are white knuckling through our own feelings and unintentionally encouraging our kids to do the same and seeing bigger meltdowns and bigger behaviors over time, there is some deeper work required. A lot of this stuff is unconscious. There are decades of wiring in your own brain, sometimes working against you. And that, shifting that, rewiring that requires support and deep work. And that's exactly what we do for parents, is help them do that work so that you can end the cycle of daily meltdowns. And we help parents do this in 8 weeks or less. So I hope this has been helpful. And again, I don't think anyone ever intended for this idea of gentle parenting to be more harmful than it is helpful. But I think when you really look at how we've interpreted these concepts, you can see why, right? You can see how it's gotten distorted over time. But the real key is finding that balance of warmth and boundaries. Yes, even when you have a sensitive child, but when you have a sensitive, deeply feeling child, there are additional things, additional considerations. Like I said, we would talk more about that concept of shame. For these kids who feel their feelings deeply, shame is so ever present. Shame is that I'm a bad kid feeling. And it makes learning to do the right things with your big feelings almost impossible. So not only do we need to show up with that combination of warmth and boundaries, but we also need to know how to actively de-shame our interactions with our kid so that they can be available to that connection that we're offering them. And that's kind of the crux of all of this when you have a kid who feels their feelings deeply. It's possible. Sounds so simple on paper, but it is messy in process, right? It is something that we have to work at, but it is very possible to do. So I hope this episode helped you understand why maybe some of these ideas that seem like they should be helping are actually making things worse and what to do instead. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you in the next episode.